Welcome back, everybody, to part 4 of the EFI conversion for the R5. I'm glad you've made it this far. I haven't bored the living hell out of you. And, you know, my hillbilly engineering trying to break through what's going on. But what it is that we need to power all the electrical stuff in the car. So what is it? We have to have an alternator. All right. Now, the original alternator setup, the original alternator is right here, but this thing broke right after I bought the car, and I put this on, and I'm going to bring you over here, I'll show you what this is, and basically it was an upgrade, and it hasn't failed me since, but I probably am not going to be able to use this for a couple of reasons I'll show you here in just a second, but this is just another small step, or small, actually it's a small hurdle we have to basically go through. I did the same thing on the Sport Quattro, and on the rally car, you know, for setting up those alternators. You know, we just have to make it exactly pitch perfect, you know, so everything's in a line so the belt doesn't throw. That's a big thing, you know, and we have to use it, you know, this is the original belt that I was using. I'm pretty much not going to be able to use that because of positioning of where everything is, but I got other belts. We'll figure something out, you know. And that's the whole thing. We'll just figure it out. We'll make it work, and we'll make it work so we can buy parts for it down the road. Because this one, I know we can buy parts. This one, I couldn't buy parts for. You probably can buy a part now, but I couldn't buy parts for it back then. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So let me bring you over here. Let me bring the cameras over. Let me show you what I got and what the original alternator was, what I used for a long, long time, and what I'm thinking about using also on other cars, from other cars. So. All right, let me bring you over and show that. Here's the original mount for the R5 Turbo. Here's the original alternator. Original alternator just fit on like that. This thing mounted up, no problem. And what it was that this alternator is a Paris-Rhone alternator. And it failed, like I said, about a year after I had the car. And I went down to try and figure out, well, I brought it down to the repair shop because, A, you have to remember, this is pre-internet for me, and there was nobody around that had this. Nobody. You know, and all the Renault stuff that was in the country was for Caravelles and R10s and Lacars, and this thing was not on, from what it was told to me, was not on a Lacar, because I remember giving some guy the number on it, and he says, no, that's a European only, and I knew no one in Europe. You know, I mean, I took 3 years of French, but man, I still can't speak it. I can make some fake stuff, but that's about it. But back then, all right, well, I brought it down to the repair shop, the alternator repair shop, that done tons of stuff for me. And what it was they looked at it, they pulled it apart, and they says, yeah, we can't get parts for these things because they checked all around. And I says, well, geez, I'm pretty much stuck. So is there anything, you know, can you match one up? He says, well, we can try. Let's take a look. So basically what they did was they built one custom. It was just an AC Delco body, and they got it as close as they could to the dimensions that this alternator was. And what it came up with is we have an 80 amp GM Delco alternator, which I can get parts for all over the place. But it's a custom job, and I'm sitting there looking at it going, and the body is pretty big. When I put this alternator up to here, with the throttle body right here, with the injector and the fuel rail, this thing is quite big and it's really hard to get an adjustment on it. You know, that's the problem with having this big of an alternator, even though it's not big. All right, so I started to look and say, okay, I need a small alternator. So I went to the boxes and trying to look for smaller alternators. First one I found was this. This is a Subaru. It's just like the Mazda ones that I used on the Sport Quattro and on a car on my R Quattro upstairs, but the Mazda ones had the lug down here, if I remember correctly, and the Subarus had the one right here. Now, or it's the other way around. Oh, something like that. But what it is that, you know, readily available. You know, you need an alternator really quick. You know, I say, hey, I need one for a Subaru. You put a Subaru in there and it walks in. But this thing won't fit really well because these lugs are so far off the body that it just makes even though this case is smaller than these, it makes it just as big. So we can't use that. So I went through the box again, and what did I find? Well, this has a little bit smaller body because this right here is a Mark I Volkswagen alternator. I'm looking at it going, well, this is brand new. It's just been sitting in a box. And I'm looking at it going, huh, isn't that interesting? The lugs are opposite, but they're fairly close to each other. And if I put it right here, I got, I can definitely do a lot of room, a lot of adjustment to tighten up the belt. And there was just a little small benefit is that the lug right here, the adjusting lug, is on top. So I can actually go to the top right here and adjust it up. That way, it's a lot easier than getting to, using a wrench underneath here, trying to get the originals. Because this is the original mount right here. This is how it goes, like that. It's a cast iron mount, and what it is that I would have to shave down this portion of the flange in order for it to fit. Because this fit over the flange, and I'm going to be not doing that method. Plus, this bolt only does one down here, but we have a place for 2 bolts down here to disperse the energy, and then we can figure out where we're going to have everything fit. And I'm going to use this Mark 1 alternator, and it's 65 amps. So it's right in between the Paris Rowan at 50 and the AC Delco at 80. If the factory said you can run both fuel pumps, windshield wipers, and lights and fog lights with a 50 amp, I'm sure we're going to be able to do it with a 65. That's at least that's what my theory is. First things first. I'm going to go get some steel. I'm going to put these back in a box. We'll take this, put that back upstairs, and I'm going to start building them out off of these 2 lugs right here because they're pre-threaded. I've already cleaned them out, and we can just start with a plate right there, and we'll work from there to see where our alternator will be. Now we have to look at the problems that's going to be associated with what's going on here. Where are we going to start? Seeing how we have the advantage of having the adjustment up here on the top of the alternator on this side, it's on the which is the opposite side of what the Paris Rowan was. What we have to do is figure out where exactly I'm going to be able to put a mount and move this thing up and down to get belt tension in order for it to be easily taken off and easily tensioned up. And we got to miss this. One of our first problems we have is this. What is this? This is the turbo feed line for the T3 Turbo, the original turbo. And what is it? This is what they call an inverted bubble flare. Let's pull this out. Basically, it goes on to this and it seals. And actually, they do a really good job sealing. I've never had one leak. But we're not going to use that because we don't have a flare to go onto the GT28 turbo that we have on here. We're going to do something completely different. Now, seeing how we're going to do something completely different, I initially wanted to swap out this banjo bolt because all this is a banjo bolt that goes into a boss on the block. And actually, it's another fitting on the block, but that extends out. This is what it is. And here is this section right there with 2 crush washers. It goes right in. What I was going to do was this. This right here is pretty much exactly the same. If you take a look at it. This goes right in here, no problem. The only problem I have is this. This was for a fuel pressure gauge. You're probably saying, well, okay, why do you know it's, the thing is rust inside it because that's the fuel went through there and just evaporated and that's where it rusted. But the thing is, this is what they call a -3. This right here goes right in there, and I had this line. This line, I'm not sure, it came out of my box. It's a brake line of some sort. But what it does do is it feeds oil. I can feed oil to the actual turbocharger. But the problem is getting a fitting on the turbocharger to work with this. And also, I was looking at it going, I think the -3 is just a little too small. And you have to remember, this is an oil-cooled turbocharger. There's not going to be water-cooled ports utilized on the turbocharger. Even though they have them, but we don't need that. We're not going to use the water-cooled function on it. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to change the pressurization to the turbo or the turbo feed line over. I'm going to tee it off of the remote mount oil filter. Because this thing is pressurized almost instantly, just like this is pressurized. So we don't have any oil starvation problems per se. I just have to figure out, I can't remember, I have it in the book, but which one's pressure, which one's return. But what I'm going to do is I did this. I wouldn't grab a banjo bolt like this, and you're probably saying, well, where'd you get that? Well, if you do a lot of CIS work, or you've taken apart a lot of CIS cars, this is what you're gonna get. You're gonna get a ton of banjo bolts. It's like, because I save every single one because you never know what's gonna happen. And they're pretty much standard sizes. You know, this one's 14 by 1.5. It just goes right in there. So what I'm gonna do, I don't have anything clean on this thing, but I mean, I wiped it off, but I don't have the other crush washer, but it doesn't matter. Just gonna fill it in here like this. It screws right in, no problem. And the thing is, also, I measured it, as in, when you take a look at this, here's the fitting that you need to pressurize. You have to, here's the crush washer that's on here. You have to make sure when this thing goes down, right there, that that hole for the oil that's coming out of the banjo bolts has a clean, unrestricted, how can I put, flow into this fitting to pressurize this sending unit. You can see where this hole is. If you put this on here, right where that is, it's right in the center. So we are good to go. It's going to work. Now I'll just throw this thing on here. I got to clean it anyway, but with carburetor cleaner. But what does this do? Seeing how this is right here, and we're moving all the oil pressurization to the turbocharger over to here, to, I forgot which one, but we can put this plate right here, and it gives us a world of options of where we can put the mounting tabs. And I'm gonna probably just have a little bit like right here. I think it's gonna be good. I'm just gonna drill a hole right there. I'm gonna keep it low like this, like that, but I'm gonna keep it relatively in the center depending on where our mounts are gonna go for the base of the Rabbit alternator. Because we can run it right down here, and you know, we got tons of movement, and we're gonna miss everything. At least that's what my plan is. I mean, I still got to be cognizant of this injector. All right, that's okay. Let me go cut a couple. Sorry, let me go cut a couple holes in this. Put this on here, and then we're gonna work off of that. One thing you want to make sure is that your bolts are long enough to go all the way in, but not too long to bottom out. That's the big thing. Now we're at the point of welding or tacking the mounts that we just cut up onto the block on this plate that we just cleaned out. It's going to be fairly simple, but we have to align the pulleys. Aligning the pulleys is, how can I put this? It's easy, but it's not. We have to align the center groove of the pulley to the center groove of this pulley, and they're both different pulleys. Now, if you look at this, I've already locked this pulley to the block. Now, if you go center line to center line, you can look at this. Now I go center line to center line. What is that? Looks like it's about 8 millimeters from center line, from the edge to the center line of this pulley. This pulley is wider, it has a ridge on the end. Now, if you take a look at this, if I take a look at this, I bring my caliper out. What do I have? I have 11 millimeters. So I need a 3 millimeter shim on this pulley in order to match or in order to match this pulley on the external portions of the pulleys. So that way we can get an exact measurement. What I'm going to do is I have a straight edge. This is what I did with the Audis, putting those alternators on. I'm going to clamp this to it, but I got to clamp on a 3mm plate that comes out, a flat edge, clamp it onto it, and then we can put this pulley on the flat edge of that and weld it to it. You know, it's going to be a 3-arm thing for me to do. But first things first, let me clamp everything together, and I'll probably run over it again also while I'm doing it. But let me just clamp it all together. Let me find a piece of straight edge that I need that gives me the approximate distance from pulley face to pulley face, and then we can get this thing going. I hope that wasn't too confusing. Alternators on, the bottom bracket basically is pretty much, it's majorly tacked onto it, not fully welded. I'll fully weld that later. Moving it up and down, I clear the fuel rail, not by much, but I clear it. I clear the injector port, or the injector connector, which I'll have room for there, and I have which the connector on the back of this should clear everything, so it should be fine. Next thing we have to do is the adjuster. The adjuster is going to have to do two things. First thing, adjust the alternator to make sure it maintains tension. Second thing, the adjuster cannot hit the fan. That's a big thing. So what am I going to use? Well, this is the adjuster from where I set the collector height, and the bolts basically that I'm going to use that I'm going to cut up. This is just the bottom piece of a ball joint. When you bolt the ball joint to the control arm, these are what you do it with. When the ball joint, for me, when they're bad, I just throw them away, but I keep these things just in case I need to cut them up, and I have a capture bolt. Not a capture nut, a capture bolt on something so I can actually weld it onto a bracket if I need to. Which, in this case, guess what? That's what I'm doing. So all I have to do is take a bolt like that, put this in. Let's figure out exactly where it is, because we have full travel up into the cylinder head. We want, if this thing hits the block, I want it at this stop right here. So that way, okay, I know exactly where it is. I'm going to clean this up. I'm going to cut it, clean this this bracket piece right here. I'm going to tack it to it. Then I'm going to pull everything off and weld it. Permanent. And then put it back on. Actually, I'm probably going to brace it also. I'm thinking about putting a brace down here just for good measure, but we'll see what happens. I'm not sure yet. But let me get to that point. I'll get to that point. Let me get my stuff back on. Let me pull this stuff over there. Let me bring it over there, clean it all up, pull this off, clean it up. We can finish with the bracket. Huh? I don't think the mount looks that bad. Pretty stiff. I put stiffening plates here, trimmed it out. Looks pretty nice. Put the alternator on. Here's the alternator. It's out. It's loose, but look, very little movement. The belt lines right up. This belt, I'm probably going to change it because this is what I had in the box. I'm going to shorten the belt to probably about like right there and make it a little bit thinner to go into the grooves a little bit better. That's about the best I can do for that, but I'm not worrying about that right yet. Now, the big thing is, take a look at this hump right here. When I turn this alternator all the way up, it barely misses the fuel rail. You know what? It misses the fuel rail. That's all I care about. It's awesome. I love getting it that close. You know, and we can easily take the belt off, no problem. Now, one thing also, oh, and back here, there's the injector right here. I just turned it over. We have plenty of room. I can stick my finger right there. No problem for the connector to go out in on it. No problem whatsoever. And especially when it's out like that, you know, it's really, really simple. But there's plenty of room. Even when this thing's fully in, it's not going to contact it. That's a big thing. Now, let me pull this off. I'll show you what I had to do. I had to put a spacer in here. I had to use this washer right here. And why is that? Let me move this over here. See this plate right here that I put on here? This is a stiffening plate to move it, you know, for up and down. And I put a stiffening plate right here to move it back and forth, you know, to stop it from moving back and forth. This adjuster is bent down a little bit, so I had to use a washer to take up the slack in between here and the alternator to where it fit up. That's one thing you guys are going to have to do is when you're making a bracket, you have to make sure it's going to be square and even. Now, you're probably saying, well, why didn't you move it in? Well, because of this. This is the bolt that I drilled, you know, the hole that I drilled inside this plate to go onto the head. I have no, I have no leeway on moving the bolt this way so I could bring that in. So I had to use a spacer to put right here to make sure this is absolutely straight with the alternator and it doesn't go anywhere. And as you saw, I put stiffening plates right down here on this bottom piece, and I rounded the edge a little bit just to make it look good. That's all, you know, but you know, that's the whole thing is it's on there. It's not going anywhere. I was going to put a plate right here. You know what? I don't think I'm going to need it because it fits so well. And even with the adjuster not on there and this down here, you can't see it, but it's loose. Very little movement back and forth, so it'll aid us in making sure this belt doesn't flip around. Let me put the belt back on and we will finish up this episode. Well, I think that looks kind of cool. It'll look better with some coat of paint. And I still have to do a little bit more grinding. And that was just what a Cold War motor guys say, level 1 tidy with the grinder on there. I mean, it was just a quick blast. I need to get it a little bit better before I paint it and put it on there permanently. But I really like it. You know, if you look at the belt, it's absolutely straight on all the way around. So I'm really happy about that. I probably won't have this belt because I'm thinking about using a thinner belt to get more contact in the pulleys and to sink it deeper in on both sides, but I don't know. But this was in the box. It's what I had, you know. But it's really where I want it. Now, I was going to finish up in the video by putting the pressure and return lines on the turbo, clocking it, all that stuff. None of the parts came in. So I'm just going to hold off. I got to do the intercooler next. That's going to be its own video. And maybe after that, I'll do one small video because I still got to weld up the pulley, clean that up, and do another, you know, a lot of small stuff before we can stick this thing back in the car. And other than that, you know, thanks for showing up. I hope this is somewhat interesting. Maybe, you know, I mean, hopefully some of these principles will you know, some of the first principles will go with your car. Where, you know, if you want an alternator in your car, you're going from like a generator to an alternator. Well, you have to make sure everything's exact and just find center points. That's what you got to do. I mean, I'm just a hillbilly out here in New Hampshire, you know, trying to muck about with this stuff. And hopefully it works for you. I mean, Jesus Christ, if I can do it, anybody can do it. You know? Other than that, thanks again. I really appreciate you showing up. And yeah, I hope you have a great day. We're getting there. A couple more episodes and it'll be done, ready to go back in the car. I'd say 2. Intercooler and clean up. So, long road. No, not a long road. Actually, it's been pretty simple. Well, thanks again. I'll see you in a bit. All right, bye now.